I am a lawyer for the cannabis industry. Been doing it for a really long time, and I also am the executive director of the Oregon Cannabis Association. Well, I work in the cannabis space for lots of reasons, but what originally got me here was doing criminal defense work. And the cannabis industry is a lot of things. It's a way to provide new employment and economic opportunity. It's the way to help people and patients who are sick. It is also a social justice movement, and it's been a social justice movement for a long time. So as a criminal defense lawyer, I came to cannabis because I saw so many people who were taken into custody and so many lives that were destroyed. So to me, what drives me forward is the more we're able to normalize this business, the more we're able to have legalization in other states, the more we're able to have people accept cannabis like alcohol. The fewer people will go to jail, the fewer people who will be disproportionately impacted by the drug war. So it's really a broader fight. It's really to stop the war on drugs. It's really to normalize this plant. It's really to stop incarceration. Those are the things that move me in this industry. Well, I think that it means that I get to control my own destiny. So I have been on my own as a lawyer since 2007. I've been a lobbyist. I've started a law firm, and now I've come to this law firm where we're able to have this really big, broad national reach. So to me, it means being able to control your future. It means being able to make decisions about where you go and what you do. And it means also being able to shape and drive this industry forward everywhere. I think that we've seen a progression for cannabis cases where when I first started, people really, at least in Oregon, it's different in other places, you get arrested. In Oklahoma, you're in trouble. But in Oregon, we've had the medical program since 1998, and it shifted all the way through to the recreational program. But in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, what was really hard was that people really were still going to jail. And then we would go to people's houses that had been, flash bombed. You would go into houses where people had been tear gassed. You would see people go to prison. And there are a lot of problems with the way we treat the criminal justice system here. But as it directly relates to cannabis, the hardest thing was seeing people go to prison for cannabis-related crimes. And Oregon has always been, or has been at least in the last 20 years, relatively progressive in how we treat those. But people are still going to prison. People are still going to prison in federal court, even now that we have legalization here. So I think that every case that somebody's life was negatively impacted, or in some cases destroyed, because of the way we treat cannabis, has been a hard case. We've certainly won lots of them, but until we've essentially decriminalized it here, it's been a challenge. So the biggest issue in these cases was always, did you have more than your plant count? Were you shipping somewhere? Were you seriously breaking the law? At least in Portland and other places in the state, cannabis was treated a little bit differently. But really what you were trying to do for a lot of these people was mitigate the lifelong impact. So can you keep them out of custody? Can you get them a conviction that they can expunge later so it doesn't impact them forever? Can you make sure that their kids don't get taken away? Criminal defense lawyers define winning in a million different ways that don't feel much like winning. So for us, if we were able to mitigate the damage and to be able to look forward to the future so they could get their crimes expunged, that always felt like a win. Well, I mean, my personal attitude to cannabis is that it's safer than alcohol, that there's absolutely no reason it should be illegal, and in a perfect world, it would be not so heavily regulated, but we don't live in a perfect world, but my attitude towards cannabis is nothing but positive. I think the major difficulties in the decision making primarily revolve around at least here, primarily revolve around the struggle between retaining the medical program and the adult use program and how those two are interacting with each other. So there are a lot of people with disparate interests. There are a lot of people who have different ideas about what regulation should look like, and that is sometimes geographically driven. It's sometimes driven by what program you're participating in. So to me, that's the biggest challenge, is trying to find some middle ground, especially if you were regulating cannabis where you had no federal overlay, where it was just like regulating alcohol, the conversation would be much easier. But we're very much defined by trying to stay out of reach of the federal government. So that makes those conversations more difficult. The most ideal thing would be for it to be descheduled at the federal level. That's really ultimately what needs to happen, is that the federal government needs to come in and say, we're going to treat this like alcohol, we're going to take it off the controlled substance list. Not reschedule it so it's a lower level, but actually deschedule it. Until that happens, the more states that legalize, the more impactful that is on the federal government, the more it pushes them, and the more you've seen enough of a sea change that you can't, we call putting the genie back in the bottle. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. How can you come after 37 states who have legalized cannabis? At what point do you have enough of a majority where it's inevitable to see federal legalization? So the answer is yes, that the states need to make their own decisions. They need to legalize cannabis, and that's what will propel us towards seeing federal legalization. I don't know. My life beyond a lawyer. I mean, I'm a parent. I like to read. I like to travel. We like to go out to eat. But this has been, like, I think for everyone who's in this space, like, very all-consuming. And you spend, we talk about every year in cannabis as being like dog years. It feels like, for every year it's been 7 years. But those are the things that I do outside. We spend a lot of time traveling when we can get away, and you really have to, you're either doing this 100% or you're trying to shut it off for a few minutes. So that's what it looks like. In men, not being assholes, is that a trait? I think that might actually be the answer. I think in men, the trait that I value the most, like in men in general, or like in general? Gosh, that's a great question. I think the answer is probably a good sense of humor and not being assholes. I think that's another good question. I mean, I value the same traits in men and women. So I think overall, the traits that I value the most, both in men and women, are having a good sense of humor, being respectful and kind to each other, and being honest and forthright. Not being afraid to speak truth to power. I think being able to shut down more often. I think being able to bring a team together, being able to execute on your ideas, and being strategic and well organized. Yeah, for sure.